I don't believe that balance exists. I believe it's wholeness.
I'm whole to begin with, but I have work to do.
Wholeness to me is being able to be your own bridge to your heart, through your heart.
Lisa Hartle is a good friend of mine, and she is doing amazing things with her clients and neurofeedback. She invited me to talk to her audience about trauma, and I think it was a great discussion and something that I wanted to share here. So enjoy this conversation.
Hey everybody, I'm excited to introduce you to Mechelle Wingle. She is the founding executive of the Wholeness Network. It's an amazing online, what's your community? How would you describe that?
We call it's a library. We call it like Netflix for wellness.
Oh wow, that describes it exactly.
Yeah.
And Mechelle is very gifted. She's a holistic coach. She's a intuitive and authentic coach. Describe that. What does that mean?
So a lot of my clients, when it just really boils down to they've got to figure out who they really are, and they got to know it for real, not who they want to be or who they're trying to be. And a lot of times we define ourselves that way, right?
Oh, good, yes. And I think the trying to be, and I think it takes to get to a certain point where we even realize that we're trying to be something than what we are.
It's hard to catch.
Right. And I've seen that enough in I'm 54. I think you get to a point where you really get to a place of wanting to just be authentic and being. There's only happiness, true joy comes from that. So good.
Yes. And people, we don't know how to introduce ourselves. We introduce ourselves as a mom or whatever about these roles. But who am I as a person?
Right.
What do I like? Or what do I not like? Both of those are okay. and another thing is, like, I really help people get stuck on needs, wants, and desires. And we allow sometimes ourselves needs, and that's not even true sometimes. Sometimes we want to be needless. We think that's special to be needless or to not need anything.
Not need anybody. Wow.
Right. And then, of course, we don't have our wants are just frivolous,
Right.
And then our desires, which feel like a little bit the same as wants, but they're just a little bit different. There's a longing there that kind of feels that way. And actual self-care and actual nurturing is all three of those things.
Wow.
And knowing yourself, knowing my favorite color. And
that's so good.
If I buy myself my favorite color, that's nurturing.
Right.
But that's understanding that authentic self, right?
And just those transitions too. I remember a time, I'm just recently empty nester, and I call it to the umpth degree empty nesting when all of your kids are married, because even that's different, because they each have somebody and they are all three huge blessings, so happily married.
Right.
But as a mom, it's just, I remember as my kids started leaving the house, I went to Costco and I was just looking what for dinner, because you never you go to Costco and you have no dinner plans, but you still stop at Cafe Rio on the way going home, right? How that works. But I was in the frozen food aisle at Costco and I just was going, okay, Kenton would like pizza, I know that, and I went through each of my kids what they would want for dinner. I had no idea what I would even want for dinner. I was just, for so long, it kind of hit me, a few tears shed at the frozen aisle at Costco. I was just like, I have no idea what I even want anymore. So what a blessing.
We don't know ourselves. We haven't been given the permission. We don't give ourselves permission to be fully who we are. We want to be who we're supposed to be. And the thing is I can go, if you follow Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you start with those physical needs. You need food, and you need shelter, and you need warmth. And then you move on to emotional needs, and then you move on to being accepted by the group, and then you evolve, and then the very end he calls self actualization. It's a hard word, but it was done in the 30s or 40s. Now we would call it authenticity.
Wow.
And so usually it's a triangle, but I one day I just took it and I thought, I gotta rework this, and I kind of put it linearly, and I thought, this is the thing, you have to have all these things in place in order to get to this self-actualization, and then you go back And you start again and again, and you say, okay, this is the food I like. This is the shelter I like. This is the warmth I like. Here's the emotions I am having. And we just follow this route to find, but we have to have all of those things even to just find ourselves in the first place. And then the point is to go back and figure out what's authentic to us. What's our real needs and desires? What do I really like and appreciate? And speaking of trauma, that's the thing. When we don't get to that self-actualization, that's almost what we could define as trauma.
Wow.
Because it has stopped that growth. It's not allowed us to move along that line to understand ourselves. So we have a disruption there. And then
explain that. So trauma causes that disruption, or it's traumatic not knowing ourselves?
Well, I don't think we get to know ourselves if we have trauma.
Okay, gotcha.
So we can't move up the thing, up the ladder, because we've had, not a traumatic event, but trauma is a little different than a traumatic event. And I tell this story over and over again, so people probably heard it, but the best example I had, and it was traumatic, but it's such a good example that I go to it. So a few years back, my niece was getting married, and as one of the aunts, you go and you set up everything, and so after it's over, you're also taking it down. So I lived about, not quite an hour away, but we were late cleaning up. So I was on the road at 1 or 2 in the morning, heading down the freeway. It was dead, nobody was on the freeway, and I'm just singing along to my music, and I look in the rearview mirror, and there is lights right at my tail. Like it was, and I jumped, I was like, wow. So I pushed on my gas, I'm like, oh, am I in the way? I was in the far lane, over here, the quick lane. So it's but they could have gone anywhere around me. there was nobody on the freeway, but the car came up to the side of me, and then I moved forward and I moved back. It was a traumatic moment. Yeah. It was so scary. It was threatening, right, to my safety. And luckily, at some point we played this game for what felt like forever, and then finally the car just sped off and took off on the freeway. And I had another half hour of driving. I get home, and I'm just shivering. I get into the tub. I wake up my husband. I'm like, this thing just happened, and it was just scary. And I had taken my trauma training at the time, so I understood. I'm like, that was traumatic. I need to do something about it. So I told my husband, I think I need to drive that part of the road again. I need to do that. But I never quite did. I never got around to doing it. Well, time goes by, and I open up my phone one day, and there's my niece. It's been a year. It's been 1 year of bliss, and my body went, whoa. Now, because I knew trauma, I knew I got, that's the trauma. So I was having a physiological response. So I went immediately to the people I know and was like, I need to work through some of this trauma. Now, the old me, before I was educated, before I understood, probably what would happen is I would have, a protector would have popped up and just said, we got to do something else, and I wouldn't have felt it. Now, yeah, because the thing is it's a body reaction, and we dissociate it from our bodies because we can't handle those feelings. We don't like those feelings. So I probably wouldn't have actually felt that trauma. I actually probably wouldn't have felt it. My other systems would have popped into play and directed me into something else to make it not happen, to not feel it. But because I had done training and stuff, and because I work on being present and embodied in my body, I felt it. Wow. And then I
recognized it.
Yes, and recognized it and knew what to do. But I look back at myself, and there were three or four steps I might not have taken had I was unaware of what trauma really was. Because the fact is I'm here in my home. I'm not on the freeway driving. Nothing's wrong. Right. Everything's fine. That's in the past. Right. That was so long ago. Let it go, right? Yeah. But had I not, I needed to get that trauma out of my body and allow my body to do what it needed to do. And we were talking before about, that's where this idea of the trauma lives in the body. So there's a traumatic event, and then there's the trauma that happens. And we have big T traumas, and we have little T traumas. Right. We have those traumas that maybe someone else would just think, what's, whatever. It's whatever my nervous system deems as unsafe for my being. Right. And that can be a million things, right? It can be the little moment that pops in and, and just, I was working through it with a group, and I showed up at our coaching. We have one day a week where we talk about things, and then the next day we just kind of work through whatever they want. They can ask me all kinds of questions. And I decided I was going to show up as my authentic self. So I just barely brushed my hair. I didn't have any makeup on. I was just wearing my thing I had run with a dog. But my whole point was like, I'm going to show up, authentically. And I pointed out the next time, I said, I wonder how many of you were really upset or really bothered by that, right? And they're like, no. And I'm like, but how often do we not show up because we're nervous, but you didn't take hardly any time to worry about me, but you kind of expect me to do that about you, right? And I said, this is the thing, is I have a trauma about that. I remember when I was in 3rd grade, I somehow I'd gotten like my hair was messy or something in the back, and one of the girls would like, look at her,
Oh no, 3rd grade.
Yeah, 3rd grade, right? Those things. And I mean, I remember that, and in my mind, I feel like as if everybody in 3rd grade is going to remember me for that, right? That's how it's played
Center
out.
Stage syndrome or whatever that's called. That just, we think everyone's watching just us.
Right. And it's probably not the case.
Yeah.
But I had to learn to, as I'm telling them that, I'm like, I'm still feeling, I still recognize that I have that memory and that's difficult, but it's not stopping me from being who I am. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh, that was just beautiful. I'm not going to change the memory into something beautiful, right? A traumatic moment, we're not going to change it and necessarily have gratitude for it, right? But we begin to separate the body's response from the memory instead of having those two things
Which I think step one, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would think step one is recognizing the trauma. I mean, some people aren't able to tie in step one to step two. That you're like, no, I remember in 3rd grade, or I mean, to be able to go and back. And so you said for your body to have to feel that. How do you? Okay, these are the steps where I think, first of all, to recognize something was traumatic, and then to go through and find, do we need to find when the event happened, or is that?
Sometimes it depends. The problem is now, we have, we've talked about, like, if you have something, we would call it PTSD, so if you had a PTSD moment, you have a moment and there is a memory there.
Right.
But there's such a thing as complex PTSD, which is it happened over long periods of time and very often. So pinpointing it means nothing.
That's so good.
It's not a matter of pinpointing.
It was just life.
It was just your life.
Yeah.
So that's a little trickier. Because it'd be nice to just have the moment of time when we could just redo it, and we play it like that's. I do that with clients, so many times when we can think of a memory, and maybe this memory doesn't represent all memories, and that's why we do it more than once. But we go into that time and that period, that experience, and we actually let them. Whether sometimes they just do it in their mind. Other times they actually move their body, but what would you have rather? What did you wish you could have done? Because usually what happens in the traumatic moment is we freeze.
Yes.
We usually just kind of freeze, and we don't feel what we should be feeling. But like we talked about before, if you watched a movie of yourself, you would be having all sorts of feels that you don't have in that time period, but you needed to almost. So I mean, I had a client, really struggling currently. I mean, what she was struggling with was she had a son die by suicide, and every time she'd pick up her phone and it was one of her kids, she was having a reaction, right? I mean, wouldn't you not? Like, who wouldn't? Right? Who would not? But she was saying, this is disrupting my life. This is disrupting me. And
she couldn't will herself to not have that reaction. I think that's that's a kicker too, that it's just you recognize, I mean, when it's affecting your life, but you can't, sometimes you need help, and you need a coach to walk you through, to help you through those traumatic patterns that we establish. And so we've even talked about core beliefs that are made in those moments that I mean, you don't recognize it's a core belief. To you, it's just truth.
Right.
It's just, it is what it is. Where you can have someone come and show you, and it's just like, that's not even true. I mean, that's just something that you made true that night. Michelle's helped me through some things from growing up of just traumatic experiences. We all have them. I mean, different times. I just said at you. But it's just, I mean, but we really do. And there are some times that you need someone to walk you through them. So, I feel like that's the like such the gift of connection. Like, that's the most, I feel like, sacred thing you can do. I feel like I do with people is I walk with them through their experience, because I know I have the training. Sometimes when I go have a heart-centered therapy session, I literally know what they're going to say next. But it makes all the difference in the world for someone else to say it to me than to say it to myself. And I think that there's power. I truly believe we're given experiences to help someone else later on. I mean, I have a program with divorced LDS women that have been betrayed, and it's really interesting. Every time when it has come up, every single program of the moment they found out, that moment they remember what they're wearing. It's kind of like 9/11, where we all know where we were. I mean, I remember I was in my PJs, and it's just but these women will go around the circle, and it's not part of the discussion. It just organically comes up that they were like, oh I found something on email, and then someone will say, do you remember what you're wearing? My pink shirt. I mean, they know it is a core. It's just time in stops. Them. Yes, it's a time stamp as well. So it stops and stamps what is going on with that. And sometimes they develop a belief about themselves in that moment that to have somebody else who has walked that path a little bit ahead of you to be able to say, that's to challenge some of those. So anyway, that's when we get a disruption that doesn't make sense, right? Because that doesn't make sense that this person that loves me would betray me. Right. That doesn't fit in our brain. Yeah. So we've taken these two things, and we've put all of a sudden the balance of scale is off. Right. And so sometimes what we do is in order to get the balance just to live, we say, I could have been, or I should have been. We take that internally just to get that, because we can. Then our brain can move on, because our brain is an equation maker. It's a problem solver. Right. So it's like, problem, how do we solve this problem? How do we solve for X? Oh, I must be ugly. I must be this. I must be this. It was my fault. Yeah. Or just all of that. Right. And that's just some way. It's unconscious. It's not something we even sometimes are aware of. But it brings that back to balance, and then we feel like we can move forward. But the brain, that's a short-term solution that does not work long-term. Right. Because then that belief starts to play out. It starts to create, and then we get so tied up. It's like a knot, and we have to pull that. We have to follow that string all the way back to those moments. Yeah. And I don't know. It's not just about saying, let's think about that moment, but okay, in that moment, what do you wish you could have done? Wow. And then we'll play it out, like, I wish I could have. There was another woman, she was, she wanted to lose weight. She couldn't figure out how to lose weight, and she remembered being made fun of. I mean, it's something where it's like, yes, this has been in my memory all the time, but it doesn't register as a problem until she went, until we go through a process and say, when was the first time? And she's like, I was on the school bus and they were making fun of me. Wow. And what do you want? What did you wish you could do? And she's like, I wish I would have screamed at the top of my lung. I said, then we're going to sit here and, and she just did it internally, but I would have screamed with her. Right. And then it was just, to have their eyes are closed and they're working through this. And when they open their eyes, there's just like, oh my gosh, that was inside of me. Right. And how much energy we use to suppress that. Right. Those balls, the balloons are like beach balls of trying to keep it down. That eventually, we're going to slip. There's only so many balls we can keep under water that it's just, I'm starting to see that as well, of just, I do think that in this phase of life of I'm 54 and empty nesting, and finally all my kids are well, my family's raised, everyone's happy, and I think that things will kind of it's like, okay, it's time now to take care of a few things. So what would be your advice for someone, because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know,
right?
And so what would be your advice to bring to for someone who, what are some of the signs, and what would be your advice?
Okay, so I wish I had them all memorized, but Richard Schwartz talks about does IFS. He talks about parts, but he has a really good.
What's IFS?
So it's internal family
structures,
systems. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the idea that we have parts, and that's helpful because that's the thing is so many times part of me's sad and part of me's not. Part of me's this, and it allows you to just have those different parts. But he also talks about there's a part. So for instance, when I talked about seeing that Instagram, before a part would have come in and called a firefighter. It was like, fire alert. Anyway, next we're going to do this, and it would have just taken me off somewhere else.
Right.
Probably I would have looked down and I would have seen a pair of socks on the ground, and I would have been like, my husband, if he would just, and I would offload that feeling and emotion about something else is what normally would happen. But Richard Schwartz talks about this idea of the big S self. And the big S self has these things. In fact, I'll send you a graphic and you can share it.
Okay.
But you're compassionate, there's clarity, there's creativity, there's calm. Like there's all these qualities of your big S self.
Okay.
That is your true self. That is the truth of who you are. If you are not experiencing that, then we have trauma.
Okay.
Like we don't and sometimes we're not going to be and maybe it's possible that we can be all the time. Like maybe that's possible. I'm not saying that's what it's supposed to be.
Right.
Like I say, more often than not, I think there's a complexity to it. So it's like I can see myself, and I can have compassion for myself out here, and I'm not totally experiencing it, but it's there. And that's still part because I'm compassionate toward that trauma. I have clarity about what that trauma is. So there's still the big S self, even though I might not be feeling like life is the best ever, right? but if we are not in that space of those qualities, then something's tripping us up. And it can be the smallest things. Right. Maybe we don't need to have every moment of our lives figured it out, but if we just take a minute and say, what do you need? I was taught this too, it's not mine, but you go to the mirror and you look at yourself in the eye and say, what do you need? Wow. What do you need? And then the best thing you can do is believe it. Believe what answer.
It. Yeah.
Whatever the answer is, believe it. And when you start to build that muscle of belief in what they need, I don't care if it's a cheeseburger, just give it what it needs, because we've got to build that muscle that it's safe
and trust. Yeah. Wow.
Because we're not going to bring up those memories easily if we don't feel safe.
Right.
And we become that's the real trauma about certain things, is we become our own traumatizers because we don't listen to ourselves.
That's
we change
so good. Yeah.
So do what it needs, what it's asking you to do. Believe it. Trust it.
And by it, you mean you.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Your own self. You look in the mirror and say, what do you need? And man, if you don't get an answer, or if that's really into your body, like if you start to just feel that repulsiveness, that's a false belief coming up.
Wow.
That's something coming up that's not true, because I've never met a person, I don't see complete divinity. I have my intuitive gifts. I've never met a person, I don't care who they are, that I don't see this divine soul, and who as a baby child you wouldn't love and care for. You wouldn't look at them and say, that is a beautiful soul, and that's the truth of what they are. So something else has come up and disrupted that. But so it's really in the body, feeling it. If you don't feel good, if you have an illness even, or a disease that just doesn't feel right, let's look at it from a traumatic or an emotional angle and get some understanding about that, you know.
Okay.
So,
and I think
getting
also,
in the body.
So get in your body. So ask what you need, get in your body. And even, I mean, I know a lot of people, and I don't have very many memories of my childhood, and it's just, is that a sign? Is that kind of a kicker? Or is that like, take your, eat your carrots? Or no, that's eyesight one.
So it's funny, when we have a traumatic time, we do two things. We either slow down time and we take note of every detail. It's like our brain keeps note of every detail, or the opposite, and it turns it off, and we don't see anything, right? And so we have, usually in those moments, we have those two things, in the trauma, we have fight, flight, freeze, or appease, or fawn. So, you know, you've got the fight, which is, I mean, anger is fight, you know, so you'll have this anger that comes out, you know, that's you know, and anger's not a bad thing. We just have to know where it is in context, right? But you have the fight. So, example, I was talking to a young girl. She's in college, and she's having a hard time. She's trying to figure out where to go to school, and she kind of wants to go into like understanding law, because her dad had gone to prison a few times for the same thing. And she was like, I feel like she's like, what's happening, you know? And everybody else, they don't want to talk about, you know, your dad, well, he did something wrong, he goes to jail. But I think there was a part of her that was like, but there's something else at play. And sometimes that's what happens, is in the trauma, we replay it rather than stay away from it, right?
Let's make sense of it, yeah.
You want to make sense of it, so it's common. But that fits in that kind of fight part of that, you know. Sometimes we'll do the opposite, or we'll push against what the norm is, you know. We'll fight, and then that repeats, you know, outside the trauma, because that becomes implanted in our being sometimes. And then, you know, the flight, we just get out, check out, leave. So a lot of times when we don't remember something, there's times when we've literally checked out and left. Sometimes even leave your body, and some people have memory of seeing what's happening, hovering over above themselves, like they literally have left their body. That's the safest thing that they needed to do at that time. And then the freeze, you know, the freeze is just stop, and that's another, it's a kind of another checkout, you know. And then appease is the opposite, or the fawn is the opposite of fight, where you move in and you, what do you need? And it's a very codependent thing, or we struggle, because a lot of times for women, that is one of the safest decisions that our nervous system makes, is to appease and not say anything and just pretend like it's okay, because we're literally, to our nervous system, we might as well have, you know, we might as well, our physical bodies might as well be in danger. It feels that same way. So you know, there's a lot of forgetting, and so it's not about remembering. It's more just for you, I'd be like, it's understanding that maybe some of my authentic power has been taken away, and now how do I want to have that back? In what ways do I want to get that back? In what ways serve me? In what ways are authentic to me about getting that power back? And that's a little different for everybody.
Right.
And maybe the anger needs to happen, so we need to get a punching bag out and you need to punch, you know, we need to get out that anger. Or maybe the run, you know, it's like, I wanted to run away. Okay, we're gonna just run. Maybe that freeze, usually in that freeze response, that's I just needed to be not seen. I needed to be left alone. I needed to be not in that space, you know, and I was frozen there. So, okay, what would we have done different? So sometimes in freeze, you bring in someone else to kind of help you out, you know, and with appease, it's like you need to, you know, go in and help that young child work through that. They don't have the capacity on their own, and you know, so that shows up. It depends on, you know, things happen. That's why, like, intuitively, I have to just listen to what they need and really go with what is showing up in that session. Every session is so different. So, but yeah,
I was really surprised at how powerful, even and validating, just to recognize.
Yeah.
I mean, of just, I had a brother who passed away in a car accident, and we just don't talk about it. And it's just, I was 11, and just to go back and kind of relive that, and to just say, man, that would have been hard. I mean, that is sad. And just wearing, and it's something so simple. I mean, that was years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, 43 years ago, but it was something that it was never dealt with. It was just so hard for my family that we just didn't talk about it or make sense of it or talk through it. We just didn't talk about it at all. Mm-hmm. And so just to recognize was so validating to me. To just, if I saw another 11-year-old who had lost a brother and he was my hero. I mean, it's just, he was 19, I was 11, 8 years older. Yeah. And it was just to say, gosh, that would have been hard. It was so powerful to me. So,
and I didn't have somebody that witnessed that for me.
Right. Or just to say, this must be hard for you. Right. Or just, we were all just trying to, I think when something happens like that to a family, everyone's just trying to get through. Right. And my family did not talk. We did not talk about any of those things. It was just head down, let's go. And so it was very powerful for me to go back and even cry about it, and just even think of how old he'd be now and miss him now. And so it's just something that simple was so crazy effective and healing to me. So to witness it and to isn't it wild how you would if you saw it playing out outside of you, you would, but when it's our own thing, we just you know. And we're communal beings, animals. We need this connection. We need to have mirroring. We need to have witnessing. And what happens, because those sensations are so overwhelming, so whatever happened to to parents that are so overwhelming, I mean, the way to shut it down is to turn it off, right? So then those sensations don't pop up, and we just sit in our heads. We just in our heads, and then our head says, "Oh, I feel bad. Let me fix that problem. Oh, we're going to do this and not feel bad." Which is usually an addiction. Usually some kind of something out there that says fixed, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. But we're not going to feel it in our bodies. But something comes up like that, and then it triggers those a little bit. No, we're going to shut that down. We're not going to feel that because it's overwhelming. But if we could just pause for a minute, it's not half as painful to go into it as it is to keep pushing it down. But it doesn't feel that way sometimes. It's scary. And I think sometimes we take the lead of what everyone else in the situation is doing.
Yes.
I mean, that's so interesting in what our family dynamics can truly teach us. And how we repeat patterns, I mean, it was just so
you
don't
know. You don't know because
you
never
do what you've done.
You've never experienced any different. So
that's so good.
So that's it. But trauma is something that I'm passionate about. I mean, I think maybe people think that it's overused, but we really have to understand the mechanism of how it is a physiological response in the body, and that our body holds on to that physiologically, not just a memory. It's not the memory doing the harm. It's the heat, the pain, the humiliation. It's the sensations of those that they hurt. And that's what needs to be healed. And it gets to a certain point where that dis-ease, the being out of ease really manifests into some kind of dis-ease. Because that's what's been happening.
Okay, and to end on, I have one final question, and I hope I say this right, but and people that I work with, and just, experience, friends and stuff, there seems to be a little bit of people, when they talk about something that was traumatic for them, sometimes can be plagued with being a victim. Or how would you address that I just wish it was more. We all have trauma. We all have things to work through, and we all are dealing with this. There's not one bigger than another one. I mean, of course, some situations are harder, but I think sometimes it can be a badge of honor to not deal with anything and just to keep on keeping on. But you also see patterns in those lives of not being 100% authentic or experiencing true joy, or just, so I know I kind of blurred that up, but how would you address that? So
there's a couple things I would say. One is we have to understand, I love Brian McLaren has a model, and he uses it more, it's like a stages of faith kind of model, but I talked to him, I interviewed him, and we kind of discussed how this is really a model for our experience, and we have to understand that different people are having different experiences. So his model is, we start off with simplicity, and simplicity is, I'm a victim or I'm a perpetrator, and they're really black and white. We're really black and white in that system.
And there are some situations that you truly are a victim. Doesn't mean you're being that, but if something was done to you in that scenario, you're right, simplicity, one or the other. And it's just, I think that I was raised in a family that it's just you just square shoulders and let's go.
It's simple.
And so,
it's just simple. It's just, we just move on.
We don't have time for that.
We move on. And so that's a place that we probably all are at, and some people are there a lot, right? Some people are there a lot. And then the next stage is complexity. So then sometimes it comes in and it's like, it's a little complex, because it's like, that bad person, that happened to me, but there's not a bad person, or I'm not a bad person, but I did that thing, and we start to experience some complexity, right? Then there's some perplexity, which sometimes when it comes to trauma, if we're in this perplexity, if we encounter it in perplexity, it's like, no, that's the past, or this happened to me, and everybody, we run by our trauma. That's not good either,
Our identity.
It becomes our identity. So we're fighting with it, whether we're fighting against it or fighting in it, or it's kind of that. And the goal is to get to harmony. And the thing about harmony is, when the idea of harmony is, I play my note, and my note harmonizes with your note. So it's both and. There's words for both and. So this bad thing happened to me, and I'm still strong, or this thing bothered me, and I'm still, a valuable human being. I still have power within me. We have to use "and" quite a bit.
That's good.
The other thing is, if somebody's struggling, if I'm talking with someone, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to answer their emotions more than what they're saying. So I have clients all the time that will say, yeah, I know, but everybody has their problems, right? Now, I know the emotion behind that is, I don't want to be a bother, or I can't, I'm not supposed to be, I don't want to complain. I don't want to be,
Other people have it worse than me.
Other people have it worse. And so I address the emotion behind that. So I have to pay attention to what the emotion behind it. So if you have somebody that's saying, oh, I don't want to, but I don't want to think about those things, then I can address that. Yeah, thinking about those things is difficult, isn't it? And my goal and my point is that I'm engaging with their nervous system, because their nervous system is stopping them from having this next step.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to talk to their nervous system and not them. And what the nervous system needs is safety. So I begin to say, I begin to do the mirroring. I begin to do the witnessing. Yeah, that would be really hard. That would be really hard to think about, and I understand why you wouldn't want to talk about that. That makes a lot of sense for me, and it does, right? It does. I'm not lying.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then maybe they won't come and they won't tell me in that moment, but then maybe the next time they'll come and it's like, okay, there's just a little more safety, and there's a little more safety until they feel safe enough to be able to face what they have.
Are they aware of that, or sometimes that's subconscious?
Sometimes it's subconscious. I think it's subconscious. I think that what they're doing in the IFS is a protector is coming in and it wants to protect something. We don't want to to replay those moments.
Right,
so
right.
we're going to make sure that ever happens again. So we have to just speak with that part of them that's protecting and allow that protector to do its job, because it's doing it for a good reason. I understand that makes sense that you would not want to talk about that, or I understand how difficult, these kind of things are. And we just, instead of maybe moving into it, we kind of just hold back just a little bit so that they can get some safety and recognize they're in there. Maybe they're in a simplicity form of their experience, or maybe they're in just barely touching the complexity, and we trust that they'll move forward in their slow times. And so that's another thing I think in our work in coaching and whatever, we kind of want to just hurry that, like, where they're supposed to walk out of the room and like everything's their life's better. Yeah. But I'm trying to, and it's hard because, I think in therapy people go in and they just kind of know they're going to go back several times. But sometimes in this field they kind of want to just come and get their, but it's like, what we want to do, I want them, their authentic self, to come forward, and it needs to have safety. And I am not safe if you've just met me. Right. You should not trust me with all of your stories. I want to, but I don't. Your nervous system is smarter than that to just say, everything's fine. So we need to build this relationship over time to where that nervous system feels at ease in my presence as it does, so that those things can start to surface. And so I think having a coach is something we should always, or a therapist, I go to mine, it's like I have these people that I still go to because I need that for myself. It's like we go and buy ourselves we get ourselves a personal trainer. How about like our whole life trainer? Right. So have the coach, or go get the therapy. Don't just say you're done. Don't just have this idea of like, I need to check that off so I can be good enough. No, you're good enough now. Right. We're going to feel even better. Right. That's it.
Even the neurofeedback, I have been blown away to see. I mean, neurofeedback, it just puts a dysregulated brain back into regulation, where all of the trauma and all of that. And as when I first started with neurofeedback, I was, and this is just my experience with it, I'm not saying anything with neurofeedback, but I would start to have memories come up. I think our brains are so fascinating, and just thoughts that I hadn't had since years, since I was a little girl. And just, I think our brains, as we clean things out, I do think it gives us the opportunity to be able to look at things and to look at different thoughts, and as an adult be able to say, change those, or just to say, that's not true, or that no longer serves me. And so even just the neurofeedback can help to put a dysregulated brain back into regulation, and things can fall to the wayside. So powerful.
So powerful. Yep, I love it. I think that's great.
My gosh, I think we have to talk again sometimes, but no, this is a journey I think that we all need to go on and to look at. So thank you so much for your time. I'm sure this is part 1, hopefully, and then we'll go from there. So thank you, Mechelle.
Yep.
Feel empowered every day with wholeness videos, meditations, downloads, classes, and more by joining the Wholeness Library at thewholenessnetwork.com.